Hey, that's not great. Let's be honest with ourselves. The Raptors, they got beaten up in this one, 112-90. They lose. This is the Raptors Reaction Podcast. I'm of course Samson Folk doing it with you, and it is of course brought to you by Goldfinger Law. And shout out to Goldfinger Law, where there's no fee unless you win, and you can contact them at 416-730-1777. And my goodness, that I was at the game. That bus ride home from Rexdale was pretty cold. I'm cozied up with a hot chocolate and a blanket. And there's a lot of fun stuff from this game. As somebody who, for a long time, Robel, he was on this podcast a long time ago. He now works in the NBA. He's a scout. We talked about how interesting Tyrese Maxey was, and he said he wanted the Raptors to trade up for him. That looks really good. It's a good thing he's scouting now. And I've been a fan ever since he put me on. And watching Tyrese Maxey's game, he finishes with 44, and he was at one point 10 for 10. He finishes 15 for 20. Pascal in that same time was 7 for 8 from the field. Scotty was like 4 of 5. The Raptors were finding really efficient offense when the ball was in Pascal's hands. And there's a reason there's a huge discrepancy between his time on the floor and a guy like Gary Trent or Fred VanVleet. And the Raptors in this game went away from some things that have worked in the past, even so insofar as this season. They didn't do them in this game. Their defense struggled immensely, and that was largely because, Tyrese Maxey is a great shooter, and truly he is great. He was one of the only players in the NBA last year to shoot over 40+% or over 40% on pull-ups and catch and shoot from three. That's an insane number. He shot 9 of 12 from downtown tonight. 15 and 20 overall. As I said, James Harden kind of kicked back. He only had 11 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. But this was a guy who, for the most part, was happy to draw a lot of attention, get those hockey assists. The Raptors playing, hedging at the point of attack, these screening actions, not doing a good enough job of tagging below, coming late so that they get the catch. They spray out to the corner. Guys like Anthony Melton hit threes. Tobias hits threes. I mean, Matisse Thybulle even had 2 threes in this game. I didn't think Thybulle's minutes were anything to write home about. I mean, actually, among all the 76ers players, he had the worst plus minus at +1. And I think that was largely because the Raptors, Thybulle, while a good defender, isn't nearly as affecting as negative as he is negative on offense. And the Raptors actually went to something where they started playing whoever's guarding Thybulle zone up an area. And I thought that was interesting. Thybulle, would he go 2 for 4 from 3, I think? Yeah, 2 for 5. But in that early part where they were zoning up off of him, he did go 2 for 4. He hit 2 in a row. That's why Thybulle, for anybody who's been wondering, like, hey, if you've looked, he's hardly played at all, if at all, for the 76ers. That's why a lot of teams have started doing this. So that's of note. But for the most part, this was the Raptors struggling to contain Tyrese Maxey at the point of attack. And I would say starting off the game way too overzealous on James Harden. Joel Embiid was out for this one. Knee soreness, talking to Doc Rivers before the game. He was asked a couple times by a couple different people to elaborate. He did not. He was not interested in doing so. He missed the game. The Raptors, obviously, that's a change in game plan. Nick Nurse was asked about it beforehand. Hey, if Embiid's out, what changes? He's like, yeah, a lot. And the Raptors, they did not play well in this one. Everything seemed late. They had some good stretches with some blitzing in the second half. I think that they had success with. In the first quarter, it looked like they had which it seemed easier because Pascal was canning a 3 at the end, was hitting everything alongside Maxey despite a little less volume. But we were looking at an offense that was keeping pace because Pascal played the full first quarter. And that was fine to see. That was enjoyable. And it looked like, hey, the Raptors have this under control. That was my thoughts, because I thought that there would be the requisite amount of play, pedigree of play, let's say, that comes once Pascal checks out. That didn't come. Not to be too hard on Fred. Fred is fantastic, has been for a long time. This was one of the worst games I've seen him play in all of my time watching. 0 for 11 from downtown, 0 for 11 from the floor, 0 for 8 from downtown, a -19. I thought that his defense as a help guy was feckless, just toothless. Didn't provide much of anything helping. And at the point of attack, he got burned repeatedly. He could not hang with Harden. He could not hang with Tyrese Maxey. One of the worst games we, the collective fan base, analysts, everybody, journalists, whatever, coaches, players. We haven't seen this from Fred. And the bad thing about this, right, is to get into how things were worse with Pascal off the floors. We started to see a bit of zone. And the Raptors, you need Pascal to kind of initiate if Fred is playing this poorly. And in fact, even when Fred is on, you still want Pascal initiating. And the Raptors started, even the last game against the 76ers and against the Heat as well, we saw cross screens in the zone. I did a video last year for Yahoo Sports where I broke down how the Raptors typically attack zone defenses. And a lot of times they work from the corners with Gary or Fred, and they run those guys off a lot of screens. They disguise flare screens, all this kind of stuff. They tried that again tonight. No cross screens, which they had success with Pascal and OG earlier this season. They went away from that. And for what reason, I have no clue. I would have liked to see it because, hey, this was a good OG game offensively. This was a good Pascal game just altogether. And, well, it's altogether for OG as well. He's tremendous defensively. But we're looking at guys who weren't really involved in what the Raptors were trying to do against zone. They're more so just kind of like passing it around, probing a little bit, but none of the set action stuff that typically features Gary Trent or Fred was repurposed to try and feature the guys who were on form in this game. That was tough to see. And especially if you're running these, if you're going to run like disguised flares and make it so that, hey, Gary and Fred, these guys they're going to bust this zone. Gary can't go 2 for 7. Fred can't go 0 for 8. You're just going to go through these incredibly bad shooting spells where nothing goes in. And it's no surprise that Scotty shared the floor with them. I thought Scotty was fine tonight. Honestly, there were some nice plays made, but it's just when Scotty wasn't surrounded by shooting and Pascal, a lot of Pascal's offense was beating his own guy, getting to his own spot. Scotty didn't get to make a lot of reads against or with advantage. And, there was no payoff from the shooters in this one either. So, OG and Pascal definitely stand out from the starting lineup. But, geez, it was a tough game for the Raptors guards because they got bossed, dude. Tyrese Maxey, he was incredible. It's not just that he shot the ball well from 3, right? Like we saw Tyrese completely undo what the Raptors are trying to do defensively in the playoffs. Before that series, I made like hey, this is what to watch for. And before the series, I said, I think that they should treat Maxey like the bigger matchup than Harden, because in a defense that rotates so much, you don't want guys like Maxey who make these like quick, rapid decisions to be attacking the second side, the weak side, whatever. Your defense is in motion, they'll find the cracks. Maxey also happens to be an incredible athlete and a really good shooter. He's going to make decisions quickly, recipe for disaster. We saw that again in this game. The Raptors overload on Harden, and instead of, like, why not let Harden get his own, and you can help later on, wait, instead of being so overzealous at the point of attack. And they started blitzing later on in the game, and at least that was a step in the other direction. It wasn't the status quo. I asked Nick Nurse after the game, what seemed to be the problem with the blitzing? Was it the point of attack? Was it the rotations behind? And I think he seemed to settle on, he thought the rotations behind it weren't crisp enough. Guys weren't getting to their spots fast enough, all that kind of stuff. And so the Raptors were just behind the 8 ball. And as he said, when the Raptors would get stops, string a few together, which they did, we saw on the other side of the floor, if Siakam wasn't there, the Raptors weren't generating offense. Truly. Chris Boucher, I thought, was awesome in this game. Precious played. He had a really tough time trying to implement himself offensively. 0 for 6, 0 for 3 from downtown. He had a tough time of things. He ended with a -10. And I don't think that's indicative of his defense or anything like that. I was fine with Precious's defense. He didn't have a game that could have helped change the Raptors' fortunes, which he's certainly capable of. But offensively, against the zone, he didn't hit his threes. he's always had a little bit of a tougher time reading as an off-ball guy what kind of space to fill, especially when it's, we saw last game I was raving about his back cut, right? That 45 cut he made and got to the front of the rim. That was awesome. This is not the crux of his game though, is being like a heady off-ball mover and that kind of stuff. So yeah, he had a tough time. Boucher is a heady off-ball mover though. I thought Boucher was getting into a ton of cracks in the 76ers defense as an off-ball guy, putting a little bit of pressure defensively, a lot of activity. After the game, Nurse had mentioned that he thought he was good, but man, it was just a tough performance in this one. I'll focus a little bit more on Pascal and OG. OG, I thought he was great, really, really good. He finishes, what was it, 7 of 16 from the floor, 2 of 7 from three, and 9 rebounds, 2 turnovers, 2 assists. It's nice to see him create, and I think there are 4 instances where he was able to create his own shot and make a bucket. And this isn't like somebody giving him, a great advantage and he's just doing finishing stuff. This guy taking a possession from scratch, getting to his spot, getting to a dangerous spot on the floor, and making the possession work, getting points out of that. He was able to do that in this one. His defense, it obviously doesn't shine as bright when everything is in disarray like it was in this game. There was a gamble that I didn't like. He tried to pick Montrezl Harrell in kind of a broken play where I think if Montrezl Harrell, the shot clock is winding down and he gets the ball above the break, just you're probably going to have a 0 on that possession. If you're the 76ers, you're probably going to have a 0 on that possession. So I wouldn't gamble. I understand why he wants to. He wants to get out and run, help the Raptors get back into it. But yeah, just a really good game from OG. And Pascal, we talked to Doc Rivers before the game, and he was talking about how hard it was to make Pascal feel uncomfortable, and that he was going around like kind of the cliche stuff like, hey, if you force the ball out of a star's hand, maybe they're going to try and force their offense later because they want their shots, that kind of stuff. And Pascal, that doesn't really work with though, because Pascal makes the right reads a lot of the time. I know in a game where he had 5 turnovers, a lot of these were in transition and kind of messy basketball, but it was a weird game as far as like how some of those turnovers cropped up on both sides of the floor too. Like the 76ers had some crazy turnovers in this one as well, but Pascal just clinical, getting to his spots, making shots. He was really, really good. And if the shooting had been better, I imagine there's a couple compounding things, right? Is that if Fred shoots the ball better, maybe Gary and Fred, OG, whoever, right? Maybe they shoot the ball better. Pascal is a lot closer to 10 assists. If the other guys are hitting shots, maybe there's less attention or less shading towards Pascal. Maybe he gets up to like 30 points. It's the fact that they were struggling offensively and he had so much attention and he was still kind of working away, chiseling, getting to his spots, and ends up with 26, 10, and 6 on a very efficient night, and also just something to keep track of. 7 of 9 from the free throw line. He's put up some 50% from the free throw line in a couple of these games. So 7 of 9 is very encouraging. But yeah, 26, 10, and 6, nothing to sneeze at. And defensively, yeah, there was talk, obviously, of Joel Embiid being lesser than defensively in game 1 of this little 2-game series. But it's tough to gauge guys like that when your point of attack defense breaks down so often. It's like, so many rim runs or so many closeouts to the 3-point line. How do you contend with all this stuff and still contest everything in good faith? Sometimes you're going to throw in the towel a little bit. And especially if guys are coming right at the rim, which wasn't really the problem with the Raptors tonight. It was more so the 3-point line, right? There was a lot made by the 76ers. But yeah, it's just tough if you're the backline defender to save games, especially if things are going poorly at the point of attack. But yeah, the write-up for this game, you're probably listening to this in the morning since it's 1:30 when I'm recording this. But the write-up for this game, I'm going to be talking about Tyrese Maxey and Pascal Siakam. Go to RaptorsRepublic.com and subscribe so that you can read it. As my written work this year is paywalled. Please do go pay for it. I think it's well worth the money. But that's what my piece will be on. And yeah, the Reggie Evans Award, I probably would have to give it to Chris Boucher tonight. That's He was a hustler, man. He's a grinder all the time. He never stops, never quits. And I think if guys played with the energy and the attention to detail that Chris Boucher has started to play with or has been playing with for such a long time, man, guys will improve their game immeasurably if they follow his lead. He's very impressive. The top quick reaction comment is from spanishsupafly. Quote, I can take a loss to an opponent that plays better on any given night. What I can't stand is watching this team beat themselves by playing like a bunch of goofballs. So many unnecessary and careless turnovers. It drives me nuts. Also, what a stinker of a game by Fred. I hope they all have a heck of a bounce back game next time because this one left a bad taste for sure. End quote. You darn right, Spanish Superfly. It's it's tough. They gave up so much in transition that should have been points for them, whereas just funky, goofy decision making, as you said, playing like a bunch of goofballs. And yeah, Fred, a stinker for sure. One of his worst. That seems to be consensus. People are like, "Hey, wow, Fred played really bad," but always, couched into saying how much they appreciate Fred. So that's nice. Thanks for keeping it that way because Fred, you know, NBA athletes of any kind, you want them to play their best. This isn't entertainment, and you want them to play best, and you want your team to win, all that kind of stuff. But I'm glad there's some grace and some patience to say, "Hey, Fred's pretty great. Maybe this is just a one-off." And for anybody worrying about his health or anything, Nick Nurse said he asked him during the game, like, "Hey, you feeling good? Feeling bad?" And Fred said he was feeling good. So something to keep an eye on. No practice tomorrow or today where you're listening. So the next news you'll get on all the ongoings: Otto Porter Jr.'s personal leave, Fred, how he's feeling, kind of bouncing back with a fresh mind. That will be informed upon on Sunday. You can get practice updates from me at SAMFOLKK, so Sam Folk on Twitter, if you're into that sort of thing. And thanks for tuning in. I do not have to do the preempt of in the morning or at night, because this one's in the morning. Thanks for tuning in with me. Have a blessed day, and goodbye.